I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Public Works Committee for the City of Hudson. It's Wednesday, July 13th. My name is Joy Knutson. We have our Public Works Director today, Mike Mraz, and our City Engineer, Dean Chamberlain, is present. We'll take the roll call. Mike Kennedy.
Here.
Sarah Brook.
Here.
Great. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from our last meeting, which was June 13th.
I move to approve the minutes from the June 13th meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved as written. Okay, so our first item, we have no citizens present tonight, so no other comments from the public, so let's go to new business. And we'd like to get a report on the sidewalk and curb project that's prepared for the summer.
Thank you. We received bids for our 2022 sidewalk and curb project last week. Only one bidder is received from Pember Companies in Menominee, Wisconsin. So I've attached in our issue sheet the comparison between the engineer's estimate and the bid that we received. So the bid is higher than the engineer's estimate. Since this is a relatively lower cost project, in the absolute cost terms, it's not super high, but the percentage over is more significant. A few items that were much higher than anticipated were the mobilization. So that means essentially the cost of the contractor to get all their material and people on site to do the work was a lot higher than anticipated. And also the removal costs for various things were, especially the concrete items, were higher than anticipated. That kind of made the entire project cost a little higher than anticipated. So, so we, I sent out an email earlier today with an updated table comparing the engineer's estimate project totals to the as-bid project totals. A couple things to note with that is that after we bid the project, we had a couple other spots that we have been communicating with residents in regards to. So that would be adding a couple spots to the scope of the original project. So if you look at what I had sent to you, you see the estimated quantities are a little higher in the as-bid versus what I had for the engineer's estimate, and that's why. And then also the bottom items in there, the special assessment, storm insurance, and CIP funds under as-bid project totals. You'll see kind of how that all gets split out for this project as far as how this project's being paid for. We had budgeted $50,000 in CIP funds for this project, and right now we're sitting at, didn't even bring up that email on my phone, $64,600-ish for CIP funds. There's a couple things we could do with that. We can look at other bids that we're going to be receiving, and we have a couple still out there for other projects to see if we get lower bids on other projects than anticipated, and shovel some money around to cover the extra that we would have on this project. Or we could look to take off a few spots on this project that are maybe less important in, I guess, our eyes, to save a little bit of cost on this one. I don't know if Mike has anything to chime in with any of that, but
yeah, I mean, I guess what I would recommend is approving the project tonight, and like Dean said, we can reallocate monies from other projects that we had identified in the CIP. One being the trail maintenance project that we had. We haven't gone out for bid for anything on that CIP item yet. So we do have $80,000 available out of the trail maintenance CIP that we could reallocate towards to cover this cost. I'd hate to pare it down just because of Dean's work and all the assessments that have gone out, so on and so forth. I'd hate to cut it at this point. And there are a lot of needs out there with this. I mean, the ones that we picked are necessary, so I would just assume go forward with this project and then just take money from and reallocate it from a different CIP item.
and just,
Okay.
I think this has been said before, but generally we try to hit like the highest tripping hazards with this project for our sidewalk. There's a neighborhood up on the end of Grandview Drive that we're kind of focusing on with the tripping hazard stuff this year. There's a lot of street trees that have heaved up sidewalks up there. And also other places around town where we have those significant tripping hazards. That's kind of what we like to shoot for. And then some other miscellaneous issues that we've heard from, residents and stuff that, hey, when can we get on your next sidewalk project I'd like this
Sure.
fixed. And we've had that conversation with them already to say, okay, there's assessments involved.
Okay, so
and they're like,
you've already communicated. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
people are expecting their sidewalk to be replaced this summer.
They are, and they've
Yeah.
already been told about the special
Yep.
assessments, so you've broken the news and
Yep.
might as well keep
Yep.
going forward.
that's what we would recommend is to
Recommending
keep
that,
moving
okay.
forward, yep.
I have a couple quick questions. So I know last time we talked about mud jacking as an option. Is this the stuff that's too extreme for that option?
Yeah, yep. We think that this would be probably a little bit outside of,
Okay.
of that possibility. And also, since we got higher than expected prices, would probably forego the mud jacking for this year and probably would try that next year then instead for
Yeah.
a project. Yeah.
Because a lot of the identified sidewalks that are in the plan are like an inch or more of deflection.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a really large discrepancy to mud jack. So,
And also, when you have these street trees too, sometimes they tip the sidewalks the wrong way as
Right.
well. And so, if you're mud jacking, a half inch to an inch, like, that might make more sense, is you don't have to replace the seating that's next to it,
Right.
and you don't have to make big grade changes and stuff like that, but a lot of these that we're tackling with this project are probably bigger than
More
what that.
extreme.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, and again, this is just more my background, real world, but I know we put out RFP, we asked them for their bid. The one thing, like you mentioned, the mobilization is not just a little higher, it's pretty extreme. Is there any room, and again, this, for the city to go back to Pember and say, thanks for the bid, we really like it, but we're really, that's an extreme difference, or that's not our budget, can you sharpen
Negotiate.
your pencil? You'll get this bid if it's, another 20 grand less. I don't know if that can occur, or is that bad practice? I'm just wondering that, because it was so extreme from what you originally thought it'd be.
Yeah, it's a good question. With the way competitive bidding process works with like state statutes and stuff,
Yeah.
Likely what we would have to do if we wanted to pursue something like that is we'd have to reject the bids and bid it again,
Okay.
essentially. Once you have bids that are received competitively, unless something drastically changes with the scope of the project that you had put out to bid, you
Okay.
can't really go back to them and say like, hey, we need to negotiate like, about what the prices you gave us are,
Okay.
that kind of thing, yeah. So there is that option to reject the bids, but at this point in time of the year,
Right.
that'd be pretty risky, I think. I don't know that we would get a better price.
Yeah, no, totally. I was just
Yeah.
trying to educate
Yep.
myself on that, so
Yep.
I'm fine with that.
So, and just to kind of play off of Mike's question, only one or business responded. I feel like usually we have two. Is this kind of, do you think this is more going to be how the future goes, where we're going to have these kinds of really only one to pick from?
Well, it's a good question. This is a little later in the year than we usually put this out to bid, so that probably has something to do with it. Other people might be booked up for the year or something already. I believe the last time, so we didn't have a project like this last year because we had the Highway 35 project we diverted our sidewalk funds to. In 2020, when we had this project, we had, I believe, two bids.
Yeah.
It was Pember who got the lowest bid, and then another outfit, I think it was out of Minnesota somewhere. So we only had two bids the last time we did it.
Okay.
It's always good to have more than one bid. Obviously, usually more competition the better with the prices you get, that kind of thing. But
the problem we have is, I
Yeah.
mean, the projects that we have, or the funds that we have available, it's kind of in that that tweener price range.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the big guys to come because there's not enough money here, but yet the prices are too big for the little guys.
Yeah.
So you kind of stuck with certain contractors that are able to bid this project out, and I feel comfortable, doing so.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say Pember does really good
A
work.
nice, nice
So,
job.
Yeah.
Well, while I'm sad to divert funds from something like trails, I do understand the importance of this in a safety perspective. So I will move to approve the bid from Pember Companies.
A second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, next item, 5B, we're going to talk, discussion possible action on traffic calming policies. And Mike, are you going to take that one?
I can intro it, and then if you want to piggyback. So at the last, about 2 public safety meetings ago, I believe, the discussion came up about adding speed humps at various locations throughout the community, and it was brought forward to Finance Committee at probably 2 meetings ago as well. And the discussion and action out of the Finance Committee was to revert it back to Public Works Committee for continued discussion, available funds, impacts to the roadways, so on and so forth. So that's why it's on the agenda tonight. And in your issue sheet, I kind of put a brief summary of, as far as what the work that Dean and I have done up to this point, as far as putting together a speed hump policy, probably 3 years ago now, or I started 3 years ago now, and then Dean took it. And we got to a point where it was just kind of lost in the shuffle. COVID happened, so on and so forth. But kind of when we were going through that process, I recall discussing much larger policy regarding speed reduction and traffic calming. And it's something that I would probably look to recommend as far as not just focusing on one device to calm traffic, but a number of them, whether it's, engineering a road, bump outs, mini roundabouts, so on and so forth, instead of just looking specifically at speed humps. So there are concerns, especially if we're doing portable speed humps, drilling into the roadway, taking the staff time to do so, and then just, you're opening Pandora's box, and all of a sudden we have a community full of speed humps, so on and so forth. So, I think that's kind of the summary as far as why it's in front of us tonight. It's for your discussion on what you would recommend us as staff moving forward. If you want us to see us develop a more comprehensive traffic calming plan. I know other communities have that. I did reach out to like La Crosse and Woodbury, and they have much larger plans that incorporate a lot of different things in the toolbox that we're able to pull from as staff, because as you know, each situation is different, right? And not one thing is going to work on each situation. So there might be a myriad of things to choose from. So I think that's the summary. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone have comments about the suggestions or other things you're hearing people talk about for speed issues?
Good.
Go ahead, Mike.
Shall I go?
No, go right ahead.
Well, alphabetical, I guess. I like your term. Putting together a toolbox for future use and different areas, because there's not just one answer. If we had the one answer, that's what we'd be talking about today. Just the one. It seems like there's a lot of things. The little here, check your speed signs, the radar thing, whether it be the trailer or the little one or whatever. Those are all good things. Speed humps, I've heard from people, and it just echoes what I think. I think that, should that still be in the toolbox? Maybe, but at the very bottom of the toolbox type thing in my book. I've heard, from you in the past and Dean about, the cost, the maintenance. We're drilling holes into roads that we're trying to keep the water out of, and here we go, plowing. So I'm not really in favor of those. I also think it causes law-abiding citizens to have to suffer through a pain because of the 2% of people that want to speed. I also know, not from experience, that if you hit some of those speed bumps at the right speed pretty fast, you can go over them pretty quick and not have any damage. So, if it's a 25 mile an hour and you hit it 40, you're probably okay. So I like the idea of having a master plan, or, you know, kind of a working plan and a toolbox, but I would recommend that the speed hump or bump, or whatever we want to call it, be kind of the last on the list to use. I think technology has come so far that we can use some of that to try to calm streets without causing all of us the headache of those speed bumps. That's my 2 cents, or 3 cents, I guess, with inflation.
I do think there is a speed issue in our community. It is probably one of the top concerns I hear from people, and certainly not something I anticipated when I decided to run for office. But, and so I definitely think a traffic calming policy is the route to go. I appreciate and would like to involve other folks from Common Council and get their feedback, because this is one of those things that there is a ripple effect, and so it is definitely impactful. And so I affirm this and think this is the right route to go. Point of clarification, if we recommend Common Council to direct staff to develop this traffic calming policy, would the next step be, would we make the recommendation, would you draft a policy and then that policy would go back to council, or would we just bring this topic for discussion?
I guess I'd rather have you recommend the council review the, what's the word I'm looking for? The need to have a comprehensive policy, because like you said, the speeding issue not only affects, law enforcement, but then it kind of trickles down to public works and so on and so forth. So you want to have everyone get a chance to weigh in on it, between anybody that's on public safety, Chief Willems, so on and so forth. So that's what I would look for. And then after Common Council directs us to, develop a more comprehensive traffic calming policy between myself, Dean, Chief Willems, we could meet and discuss and put something together that council would review.
I think that is a good idea to go to council. I agree with that too, because it is a citywide, and that way everyone has a chance to contribute or know that we're addressing it. And I know public safety obviously is getting calls and requests frequently. Chief Willems said he has like 10 or 12, maybe 15 requests for neighborhoods where they want the trailer, or that, the check your speed, flashing sign. So it's on people's minds. I agree completely with what you said. Big issue.
Also want to just say that I think I mentioned I think it was last month, that there's this Safe Streets for All grant opportunity out there, and stuff like this I think would fit nicely within that. That is kind of one part of that Safe Streets for All action plan. So I don't want to put off needed, work, but if there is an opportunity, that might be a good funding source to put in, for the time and effort it would take to put something like this together. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. So your recommended action is a traffic calming policy, which would include discussing speed humps, but not exclusively to that, which
Correct.
I do think that's a good direction to go to. Does anyone, any further thoughts?
So I'm going to put a motion out there, and if I get the wording not quite right, please help me correct that, and I will be open to a friendly amendment. I recommend that the Common Council direct staff to develop a traffic calming policy addressing speed humps and other options to explore to calm traffic.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion moved and seconded. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to, Dean's going to go to the podium to address us. And we're going to have an update on the infrastructure management plan from Dean Chamberlain, city engineer.
Working.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you.
Is it coming up on your screen there?
Yep.
Yes.
Mike's got it. Okay, great. So I just want to give an update of our infrastructure management plan, particularly the status of our infrastructure. I know Sarah has kind of gone through this presentation before, but for the sake of our new members here, I wanted to bring everybody up to speed and allow you guys to ask questions and whatnot about kind of the information that's out there already. And feel free to do so as I go through this presentation here. So a little bit of history on this infrastructure management plan. This is kind of birthed out of the perpetual question, how much do we need to be spending on our streets to be keeping up? And that's a large question. Doesn't have a straightforward answer until you know what you're dealing with. And so in order to know what you're dealing with, you got to do the inventory and that kind of thing and put together some alternatives for different things that you could do for your streets to keep them in good shape. So that's kind of where this came from. So why have an infrastructure management plan? So it helps us to get a good idea of where we are today and so that we can see what's coming in the future, because infrastructure is somewhat foreseeable as to what's going to happen in the future, plan accordingly, and then revisit the plan periodically in the future to make sure it's meeting the needs of our community. And I think where we're at right now, as you'll see, is not in great shape, and I think a lot of that is just because we have not had a critical eye on our infrastructure for quite a while. So we hope to change that philosophy and that process as we're moving forward here. So some things that are included in the plan. Pavement condition we look at, curb and gutter and other drainage issues, sidewalks and trails, and then underground utilities as well. So first thing I want to hit is pavement condition. It's a PACER rating is what it's called. It's a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being perfect, more or less, and 1 being gravel, essentially. And so I'm just going to go through some examples of what these different kind of rating streets look like. So a 10 rating, obviously, essentially is a new street, no cracks, etc. An 8 rating, so a 9 rating, maybe you have a crack or two here or there. 8 rating, you have a few more cracks, you begin to seal them at this point in time. We would recommend putting a preventative seal coat on a street like this to make sure we're sealing in that good pavement while it's still good, that kind of thing. 7 rating, we're starting to see some more cracks, maybe a center line seam kind of pulling apart, that kind of thing. Again, seal the cracks up, do a seal coat for longevity at this point. Once you start getting down to a 6 rating, you have more cracks. The top of the pavement is starting to quote unquote dry out. You can see it's a little more rough, there's a little more rock showing, that kind of thing. At that point in time, you're kind of on the edge of between a seal coat or mill and overlay. Mill and overlay being taking that top layer of pavement off and replacing it with a paving project. 5 rating, you're in mill and overlay territory. You're no longer really able. You can still seal coat, but it's less effective at that point in time. 4 rating, we're essentially teetering on the edge of, is a mill and overlay even effective anymore? Instead, you might look at doing something called a reclamation, which would be grinding up all the pavement all the way down to the gravel layer and starting over. That's something you would do if the curb and gutter is still good and otherwise the street's functioning fine, that kind of thing. Otherwise, if the curb and gutter is also in bad shape and you've got utility needs and that kind of thing, you'd be looking at a reconstruction on a 4, and then as you keep going down the list, essentially you're just firmly in either replacing the pavement or reconstructing the street at that point. And then by the time you get down to a 1 rating, you're essentially just band-aiding things together pretty significantly, and you have lots of problems with potholes, that kind of stuff. So here's where we're at right now with our pavement condition ratings. This was done in 2021. We do this PACER rating every other year in the odd years, so it's just done last fall. Our average rating is right about at a 5 out of 10. The minor streets are a little bit less, the major streets are a little bit more, and that kind of reflects the priorities me and Mike have had in the past few years to make sure we're directing our limited funding towards streets that most people are going to see the benefit for. So In the past few years, we've been looking at, seal coating streets like Crestview Drive like we did last year, Cooley like we did this year, Grandview, Hagen Street, etc. So just to give you some perspective, this kind of goes to what I was saying with those pictures earlier. Crack sealing, at 7, 8-ish, that's really inexpensive. Very cheap to do that. Once you get to a seal coat, a little more expensive, but really not bad in the grand scheme of things. It's when you get into the mill and overlays, and especially in the full depth reclamation or reconstruction portion, that the cost goes up exponentially, essentially. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in, most of our streets in town are in that kind of expensive maintenance category. But there are still a decent amount of streets in town that are in the less expensive category, and we hope to keep those in that category so that we're not, the curve isn't still shifting to the left, if that makes sense. Ideally, we would see this, kind of what looks like a bell curve right now, kind of shift more to the right. Obviously, we're never going to get it where every street is going to be a 10 out of 10. That's not cost effective. We've got other things to do with our money, right? But if the peak of the curve could be at a 7, and it's in that, seal coat range, that would be a lot smarter of us to have that kind of as more of a more realistic target to be more cost effective with our pavement condition maintenance. And also just when the pavement gets down to a 1 rating, then essentially in order to maintain that street, we're grinding it up and just turning it to gravel until we can do something else with it. For example, on Bridge Street, one of those pictures I had in my presentation, after I took the picture, Mike and his staff ground it up and it's now gravel. So keep that in mind when we get to that point. And if you think about, people who live in town here, they kind of expect that their street's going to be paved and that kind of thing. So when you start turning streets to gravel, then you get a lot of pushback, we'll say, with that. So over time, if you don't maintain pavements, it functions like this red line. It's really good for the first few years that you have the street out there, but then once you get to the year, essentially it will last for about 25 to 30 years, depending on what your traffic loads and stuff are like, or how the street was designed in the first place, before you're really in a hurting spot with that kind of stuff. The dark blue line is if you did a program of maintenance on the street. So instead of 25 to 30 years for a lifespan of street pavement, you can extend that street pavement life out to 60 years or more. And obviously, reconstructing a street is way more expensive than maintaining it periodically. So just something to keep in mind here. Sorry.
That's why, a lot of times I'll get a phone call, especially after we do our seal coat project. So for example, last year or 2 years ago, we did Wisconsin Street, right? And we got a phone call from a couple of residents, or I did, said, why are you maintaining this street? You guys just redid it. Well, it's like, you get your best bang for the buck, and it increases the longevity of that street. So any of the newer streets in town, whether it's, arterials or residentials in, some of the newer developments, we're going to seal coat those roads to make them last that much longer, because that's the proper way to maintain that roadway. So, and it's a lot cheaper, best bang for the buck. So sorry, Dean.
No, that's great. Thank you, Mike. So just for frame of reference, current average of a 5 out of 10 is on the left, and what we're looking to do is to get our average kind of more towards the right. So it's not, again, not perfect. There's still cracks in the road. There's still something going on there, but it's a lot better condition than what we've got right now. Moving on to curb and gutter, we classified curb and gutter into different categories. 1 is good, so essentially less than 5% poor sections, poor being if it's heaved or settled or joints deteriorating or there's cracking or that kind of thing, so that we wouldn't have to do too much repair work in those sections. Areas where we need panel replacements, so that would be essentially taking out little sections of the curb and gutter and replacing those rather than replacing the entire thing. they'll show you at some point in time it's less cost effective to be doing these panel replacements. But when you have, say up to about half of the curb and gutter is in poor condition, then you can keep doing these panel replacements. But then once you get to the point where you're at or above 50% poor sections, then it no longer is cost effective to be doing those panel replacements. You kind of just have to redo the whole thing at that point in time. There's also areas in town that has curb missing without adequate drainage. So the adequate drainage should be ditches and culverts and that kind of thing. This picture is out on River Ridge Road, just for reference. There's a bunch of trees that are where the ditch is supposed to be. That doesn't work very well. Or we have places in town where there is no curb and gutter, but there is adequate drainage because there is a ditch there. This is out on Bear Drive. So putting that all together, we have maps of where all these conditions are in town. So no need to study this map, but it's something that we've looked at out there. Street surface age. So this is not just looking at the rating of the pacer rating of the street, but also, just over time, even if you keep replacing, say, that top layer of pavement through mill and overlay, so over time, the bottom is also failing. And, even if you maintain a street well, over 60 years, you're still going to have, the asphalt still needs to be replaced, that kind of thing. You can't perpetually keep milling and overlaying, pavement and keep it up. But if you haven't maintained it, like I said, the poorly maintained streets only last 25, 30, if you're pushing it, maybe 40 years before you need to reconstruct it anyway. So here's a map of some streets that are at or above that replacement age, in town. Sidewalks and Trails, back in 2019, we did a sidewalk evaluation that identified some problem spots such as tripping hazards, places where the cross slope is too steep, where the widths are too narrow, that kind of thing, and curb ramps that are out of compliance with ADA. Don't have to study this map either, but this is just essentially a scatter plot of all the various deficiencies we know of around town. And then also looking at the utilities underground. So utilities need to be kept in good shape as well. In a lot of cases, we have water mains and sanitary sewers that are over 100 years old in town, especially in certain districts or in the older parts of town. Over time, the water mains will corrode up with calcium, or the sanitary sewer will have roots in it, or the clay pipe will start breaking, that kind of thing. So these are things that happen over time and need to be addressed. Otherwise, you have leaks being found in your water main and shooting water out of the road, that kind of thing. So obviously that's not good. So this map shows where we have utilities that are approaching or at or beyond replacement age. So we don't want to spend money on these streets except to, get to the time that we could reconstruct them, that kind of thing. And we also don't want to reconstruct the surface on the street and not address the utilities underground, because you're kind of you're going to be back and spending more money to have to dig up those utilities again. So some other factors we look at for utilities, the types of materials such as cast iron water mains or clay sanitary sewer pipes, that kind of stuff. There are portions of the sanitary sewer network that we know need to be upsized for future growth. There are parts of the water main system that need to be looped because they don't have as good a flow as they could. And then also pipe sizing. So in a lot of the older parts of town, we have pipes that are too small initially, so they're 4 or 6 inches in diameter for water main. And then, perfectly new over time, that might be okay, but then as that calcium builds up and over time things happen, you might have a 4-inch pipe that actually looks like this on the inside. So that's a problem too, especially for fire service and pressure in your sinks at home and that kind of thing. So putting that all together, we want to make sure that we're considering all this at the same time so we can get a point at where we're at today. So the currently due maintenance and reconstruction needs that we have in town are shown on this map. You can see there's a lot of red. Red would be a full reconstruction, so that would be essentially completely replacing the street within the right-of-way, including all the utilities underground. So that includes street pavement, curb and gutter, sidewalks and trails, etc. The yellow is surface reconstruction, so again, that's curb and gutter, pavement, sidewalks and stuff, but just leaving the pipes in underground generally. The purple line is a full depth reclamation. Again, that's grinding up the pavement, but leaving the curb and gutter and essentially everything outside the pavement alone. The mill and overlay would be taking off that top layer of pavement and repaving it. And then the seal coat is adding that rock surface on top for preservation of the pavement surface. I've not updated this map from this year's seal coat project, so you see some streets on there that we've actually seal coated this year already. So we can take those lines off the map, thankfully, but we still have plenty left to go. So, so putting that all together, what does that mean for cost-wise? I estimated that essentially to do everything on this map right now ends up being about $127 million. And a few caveats in that. That number includes water and sanitary sewer costs in there, which are generally paid out of different funds. Those are utility funds. I believe I estimated that to be 11 to 13 million of this number. So for what that's worth. However, on the flip side, this number was generated in 2021, and as we know, as we've discussed with bids that come in, costs are really high right now for materials. So if we redid this number with today's material rates, probably would be even higher. Again, are we going to be in this situation forever? Hopefully not. So didn't want to get too in the weeds with updating this number because we don't know what the future is going to hold, but at least gives you a perspective as to where we're at. Of course, even without crazy inflation things going on, there is general inflation with, you know, costs of everything goes up over time generally. So if we don't address this number, that number will grow over time. To give you some perspective as well, from 2016 to 2020, our yearly average, I spent about $1.3 million. I didn't update this number with last year's Highway 35 project. So last year we ended up expending, I believe it was $2.3 or so million instead, so we were a little bit higher last year. This year, we're on track for about 1.2. So the average might be slightly higher than what this shows adding in the last 2 years, but it's not significantly different than what we've been doing. And if you do the math, you know, we're essentially about a century out from getting under, out from under this rock that we're under right now. However, that also doesn't include the fact that, you know, if we don't maintain these streets as they need to be, the green lines are going to turn into light blue lines, the light blue lines are going to turn into purple lines, et cetera, as we keep going and we don't maintain these streets, that kind of thing. Again, over time without maintenance, the deterioration on the road happens quicker over time, and then our whole average and curve that we look at shifts to the left, and we want it to actually shift to the right instead. And you can kind of see how over time with that, you know, $1.3 or so million that we've been spending on average every year, that has translated to pavement condition ratings that have just gone down steadily over time. You can kind of think of this as a proxy for the other things that we've been looking at, like curb and gutter and utilities underground, that kind of thing. You can see in the last couple of years, we've kind of stabilized our major streets, which has been a big focus of ours, Mike and I's, over the past couple of years. So it's heartening to at least see some progress made in the sense that we're not going down further on the major streets, but the minor streets are still decreasing over time. So what to do next? You know, establish a funding level plan, establish funding alternatives and mechanisms. We'll get into more of this probably in future discussions, but you know, we only have certain tools in the toolbox for funding for these projects, including property taxes and bonding. Those are kind of joined at the hip, so to speak. Special assessments, wheel tax, or some combination thereof. At our August meeting, we'll be talking about putting together a new 5-year CIP for infrastructure projects moving forward, and with that presentation we'll have a number of different funding level alternatives, and we won't probably get too much into you know, where the money comes from for that, apart from kind of a cursory glance, because all that will be wrapped in with the entire budgeting, you know, cycle that we'll be going through this fall for everything, you know, in the city, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, so basically at our next meeting, Dean's working on putting together basically a 5-year plan, okay, for our streets and infrastructure at like a $1 million bonding level, a $2 million level, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. So it gives you an idea of the number of streets that we can do based on the funding levels, you know, that you decide to kind of move forward with in the Public Works Department and then at Common Council. So that'll be at next month's meeting for you to review that, because staff has started to put together, you know, CIPs, and we want to have you weigh in on, you know, what we want to look at doing in the future over the next 5 years. So,
yeah.
Did you previously do a CIP for a shorter window of time?
yeah, this last go around, it was only a 2-year window just because of COVID and the economy.
So that was the abnormal?
Yeah.
The standard has been 5?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I think we still, so the standard is 5, but we still only bond every other year.
Okay.
So we don't get too far out in front of ourselves. But that'd be a question for finance. That's historically how it's been done since I've been here.
And I believe that's the direction that we're hearing that will continue to be, is
Yeah.
every other year for bonding. So that almost kind of more locks in our first, say, 2 years of the CIP.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we revisit the CIP every year, but we know kind of our funding levels, at least for the first 2 years, and then kind of can plan accordingly.
Well, it gives, yeah. So basically when we put together the 5-year CIP, is Ellers runs numbers for that kind of, for that 5-year cycle, and then it kind of shows what the property taxes level would be based on those numbers, but you only lock in the first two years. That's what you bond for, so.
And the transportation utility is completely off the table.
Yeah, so a little bit of an update on that. So other communities that have adopted the transportation utility have seen lawsuits due to it, and recently there was a court case that the judge ruled against the transportation utility. So we're obviously, that's going through the process and, you know, the courts and that kind of thing. So until that, all the dust is settled on that, we're leaving that alone for this this budget cycle.
And maybe in our next discussion, because I know we have somebody coming in here after us tonight, maybe in the next discussion, I'd like some input on how we, or a better understanding of how we balance taking care of the arterial streets and respecting those, but knowing that specifically like in the districts where Joy serves, where I serve, and I think Randy, you know, we have a lot of 2s and 3s in our area, how we kind of balance that. I'd like a better understanding of that next time.
Yeah. Any other questions or anything with the things that I presented tonight, or our future conversations, or?
Thanks for the good news.
Sorry, I'm a downer.
How do you sleep at night?
Somebody's got to be the messenger, right? So, thank you.
Thanks for the update. I appreciate that, Dean. We don't have any old business on our agenda. Is there a project update that we could hear?
Yeah, when Dean sits back down, maybe he can just cover our upcoming bid openings that will be going directly to Finance and Common Council for approval.
Yeah.
Based on timing.
So we just opened bids yesterday on the old fire station across the street here for removing the old fire station and expanding the parking lot. So those will be on council this Monday. And then we also tomorrow morning have the 3rd Street Laurel Avenue project opening bids. So that will also be on the agenda for Monday as well. We have one more project out to bid, the alley project, that will be opening bids, I believe, in a couple weeks. And so that will be, you know, at a future meeting.
Yeah,
So
we'll probably put that one on Public Works agenda if the
I
timing
believe
works out.
So if the timing works out, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll have some competitive bids.
Yeah.
That'd be nice,
Right.
so that's why it's helpful. Thank you for that update. Anything from you, Mike?
Oh,
Okay. Communications or comments, something for future agenda from the committee?
Just wondering if maybe we should do an email exchange and trying to figure out a next meeting date, or if we want to continue knowing that you're going to be gone and I'm going to be gone, and there's still, they still have quorum then? But maybe that's best offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, that would be great. We're looking at rescheduling the planned date for August. And thank you for being flexible and changing today's date for my schedule. Any other comments?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second for adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.